Hi, I'm Rob Pritchard and I'm the sports editor at Manx Radio. After over a year of uncertainty, the fate of the 2026 Commonwealth Games has finally been secured. On Tuesday, the 22nd of October, the Commonwealth Games Federation confirmed that Glasgow had officially been appointed as the new hosts of the event in just under 2 years' time. However, the occasion in the Scottish city is set to be a big change from games gone by, as it'll be a reduced programme of 10 sports, including 6 parasports, across 4 venues. Included will be track and field athletics, swimming, artistic gymnastics, track cycling, netball, weightlifting and para-powerlifting, boxing, judo, bowls and 3v3 basketball. But missing out will be a number of sports the Isle of Man featured in at the last Games in Birmingham in 2022, such as road cycling, triathlon and badminton. Indeed, the island sent its largest ever Games team to Birmingham just over 2 years ago with 34 athletes across 8 disciplines. So what next for the sports not heading to Glasgow, and what from here for those who'll be involved? Well, I spoke with Isle of Man Commonwealth Games team chef de mission Erica Bellhouse to get her thoughts on the latest announcement.
I suppose a little bit mixed, if I'm honest. I think we heard little bits of rumours and we are, as you know, as we're sort of strong cycling nation. So initial shock that there's not going to be any road cycling, and that hand in hand with that is sort of like the triathlon and potentially the marathon. So that was the sort of initial thoughts. But then we turn to the fact that I'm, looking through, obviously 10 sports have been announced. We've probably got potentially 9 of those, I suspect, netball's the slightly questionable one. It usually is done through a ranking system, but that remains to be seen how that will be dealt with. But we've got 9 sports there where we have strong contenders for places. So our attention now turns to the 10 sports, but the 9 that we probably have potentials to feature in.
First off, what you mentioned there, a bit of shock around maybe say the cycling, for example, in the road races, for example, the Isle of Man had both full men's and women's teams. In that, triathlon looks set to miss out. Badminton, another which the Isle of Man was represented in Birmingham, also missing out as well. So how difficult a situation is that going to be for those involved in sports that were hoping to go, but it looks like won't be able to?
Well, I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago, Rob, and it's not easy at all because, traditionally we have always had very particularly strong cycling teams. And I'm sure there are people there that are going to be disappointed. Unfortunately, as I said, it's so out of our control. And, I think there will be quite a few people taking a bit of time to get their heads around it, if I'm honest.
And for those who could be in contention with the sports that are there, one of the things from our last conversation was that you were repeating a message over the last year. Just keep training as if they're going to happen until we get any news and updates. We've had those updates. So what next for the sports involved?
So I think really, we now know the sports. Obviously, now my brain immediately turns to what's the impact going to be on the team size, because obviously we had 34 athletes at the last Games. How will that look? And obviously at the moment we have no clue. So my message to the athletes is to carry on doing what they have been doing. Obviously, we need to get round and speak with the sports that are perhaps not included, just to make sure, that people are being managed properly. But in terms of the 10 sports that are included, my message is to the athletes to carry on training. We will be crunching numbers and working out logistics behind the scenes from today onwards and looking towards sending the strongest possible team to Glasgow.
Another area that seems to be just caused a bit of confusion at the moment is around athletics. Now, they mentioned the track and field events will be involved. Two-pronged question. First off, as far as you're aware, will that or include or not include the marathon events? And also in terms of just track and field in general, which track and field events would be in or out? Have you been given any indication as to what that might be?
No, absolutely nothing. We know as much as you. As I say, the speculation is that the marathon may not be included. The same reason as the road cycling, they seem to be sticking with stadiums. But in terms of the track and field events, again, at this present moment, we do not know which are going to be included or not included.
And the same, I guess, in the swimming side of things. Obviously, so many disciplines in the swimming. Again, has there been any indication as to which disciplines or not will be involved in that, or is it, again, still up in the air?
Still up in the air. I mean, I'm presuming, and again, this is totally me speculating, we're still looking at an 11-day Games with greatly reduced number of sports. So I'm presuming that the sports that are included will have full programmes, because that, to fill those 11 days, I guess that there has to be a fairly strong programme of events for them. But until we get finer detail, we don't know anymore at the moment.
Just coming back to Glasgow as a city, really, last hosted the Games relatively recently in 2014. It'll only be 12 years since they'd hosted it by the time the next ones roll around. So what is your recollection of how Glasgow was set up as a city to host such an event?
Well, I think obviously Glasgow, not just the last Commonwealth Youth Games, they did some work with a European style sort of multi-sport games only a few years ago. I think what has probably started to emerge is that this is going to be a different feel games. There isn't going to be a village. So I think we're probably not able to compare to the last games in Glasgow, if I'm honest, because it does sound like it's going to be a very different offering. I believe it's going to be centred around hotels and that type of thing. So I think what they're perhaps doing is taking some of the ideas that they used in Birmingham and putting them into this games, which, again, until we get further details, it's difficult to know what that will look like. But certainly I think Glasgow as a city is well placed to host any huge sporting events. So and they've got a good management team behind the organisation. So I think we're looking forward to what will be a really exciting games.
What would your advice be maybe to some of the athletes with the sports that we've mentioned that look like aren't going to make the cut there? What advice maybe would you give to some of these athletes that if they may miss out, what's next for them if they've not got a Commonwealth Games to aim for?
It is very difficult, and obviously there's different sports. You know, take our cycling team. We have professional athletes there that, you know, that I appreciate that as their day job, and they took time out of their day job to come and represent the Isle of Man, which we were hugely grateful for, and hopefully gave them the opportunity to ride for the island. But there are other sports out there that there are alternatives. You know, we're really lucky that we have a strong Island Games set up, and that gives, you know, athletes have the opportunity to represent the island at the Island Games. So I really hope that they're not too disheartened. It is hugely frustrating for those sports that hope to be included and now are not. But as I say, as an island, I think we do have a lot of opportunity, in particular turning to the Island Games. So hopefully they all have opportunities to carry on and represent the island in those areas.
And finally, just around the logistics, which you sort of touched on before, is as you've already mentioned, there are still quite a few unknowns around the finer details, but just on the face of it, with reduced amount of sports and a reduced amount of venues, for example, do you anticipate that setting things up logistically from an Isle of Man perspective could be more challenging, easier, or somewhere in between?
Oh, goodness me. I'm going to say somewhere in between, because I'm sure there's some parts that might work out a little easier, but then as with anything, there's always challenges. So, you know, I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit on there until I have a feel for, you know, what the accommodation is going to look like, etc., even down to what the team size is going to be, because I genuinely have no clue. I don't know whether we're talking about a percentage reduction, whether I honestly am speculating at the moment, Rob. So until I get more detail, it's very difficult for me to even begin to imagine what this might look like, which is quite difficult at the moment, because obviously as soon as the sports are announced, everybody wants to know immediately, which I totally understand, but we're probably a few weeks away from starting to get the finer detail.
Thank you for having the stamina to make it to the end of the Manx Radio Sportscast. You're clearly someone who has their eye on the ball at all times. Want to hear more about the latest sporting news across the Isle of Man and much more? Then might I recommend you take the plunge and subscribe to this series or a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so that, in a flash, all of our finest moments take a winner's place on your smartphone. Thank you.